Hello chickens, it's golden hour here in Amsterdam, and I wanted to do a little bit of riffing on the topic of sovereign witchcraft, freewheeling witchcraft, rebel witchcraft, going your own way, figuring out what really empowers you, figuring out what kind of witch you want to be from the bottom of your heart and soul, and making sure that you are not necessarily following along with things that you've read or things that you've seen others do, trying to push yourself to find your empowerment there, find your fizz in those places. If maybe you find your fizz somewhere completely different and you want to do something completely different, or you want to do something that feels like it's more in alignment with who you are, this is going to be a sacred permission video. I feel like I used to do these quite a bit more than I do now, and I would like to get back to them. I'd like to get back to talking about how to make it your own and how to make it feel like it's truly worthwhile for you, it works for you, and you're getting something from it. And I'm doing all of that whilst I'm enjoying the goodness of the last maybe hour of sun before it slips down over the horizon. And I'm doing it all with a glass of white wine, so I can't really complain. You don't necessarily have to be a witch to get the most out of this. I think that a lot of the things I'm going to be saying in this video are going to be relevant to you if you are not necessarily practicing some form of witchcraft or another, or you don't identify with the word witch. But I'm going to be using it for ease and because it's what I refer to myself as. But if you would rather see yourself, or if you do see yourself more as like a mystic, or just a spiritual seeker, a spiritual practitioner, and you are not really sure what kind of label you use, or you just don't think there's a label that fits you, I still think a lot of the information in this video is likely to be useful to you. And it's not like I'm talking about something that's gospel. It's not like I'm talking about something that I think applies to everybody. This video is for people who feel like they do need to give themselves maybe a little bit more permission, a dose of permission to do what they want to do, or find the kind of style of practice that really works for them. Over the time that I've been on YouTube, I have mentioned numerous times that, like a lot of people who claim the word witch in the 90s and came to their awareness of themselves being witches in the 90s, I was primarily exposed to Wicca and to Wiccan resources. There was really no way to kind of easily and quickly sort of order books online back in the day. There was no Google when I started referring to myself as a witch and practicing the craft. There was nothing like that. The internet was very slow. It was dial-up, and I can still hear the dial-up noise in my head. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have ways of connecting with each other like that. Everything was sort of like forums, message forums, which looked somewhat messy compared to the stuff that came later on. And there also weren't as many readily available books that you could purchase that were not about the topic of Wicca. Wicca was very much the thing at that time. If you were connecting with the term witch, then in terms of what was accessible, in terms of what you could find that was sort of going around and that was easy to grab onto, Wicca was the thing. Obviously there's some things within the Wiccan structure that I've taken with me on my journey. There's definitely things that I would say inspired me on my journey, but I knew that I had to give myself permission to create the kind of craft that worked for me, and I knew that Wicca wasn't it. I knew that I actually wasn't Wiccan, and a lot of the things I was reading that were sort of part of the Wiccan structure, and by that I mean the solitary Wiccan structure, that was very much a dialogue at the time, was about how you could do Wicca as a solitary practitioner. I've never looked to do any kind of witchcraft within a group setting. I always knew that that wasn't going to be right for me. But in terms of the things that were on offer within the solitary Wiccan structure, there were things I accepted and there were things I rejected. There were things I took with me and there were things that I left by the side of the road. And a lot of that was about the permission that I wanted to give myself to be as potent as possible, and also to enjoy the journey of witchcraft as much as possible. After all, what is the point in investing your time in something and embracing something and wanting to learn about something and saying, this is going to be a part of my life now, this is something that I'm committed to and dedicated to? What is the point of doing that if it's only hard, and if it's only burdensome, and if it's not also an incredible amount of fun and incredibly adventurous? I'm a hedonist, so that's pretty much always how I'm going to think and feel. And yeah, there are ways that you can take the shitty bits or take the responsibilities in your life and make them fun and make them adventurous, but I didn't see the point in having any kind of solitary spiritual practice if it wasn't going to be an incredible amount of fun. Has it also been challenging? Abso-fucking-lutely, there's no doubt, but I wanted it to be as as high vibe and as exciting and as fizzy and as fucking fabulous as it could be for me. And I knew I wasn't going to get that by just following the stuff in the books about solitary Wiccan practice, or, you know, sort of following the things that I was reading about online that others were doing, even though in the forums I was exposed to a lot more non-Wiccan practice. But even a lot of that didn't really gel with me. A lot of the things people were saying that they were doing weren't really vibing with me. I had not yet heard about chaos magic. That was something that came later in my research and later in my adventures. So it was really up to me to figure out what empowers me, what gives me the maximum amount of possibility to do potent spellcraft and to do effective ritual, and to feel like I'm really doing something that matters and doing something that gives me joy and doing something that gives me results, because results were always to one extent or another very important to me. It wasn't just about whether or not it was fun, whether or not it was going to be joyful for me, whether or not it was going to be inspiring. Those things were important, but it was also important to me that it worked. You know, I wanted to see that it was doing something for me. And I will admit that that second part of the equation, that second part of what I felt I needed from the craft, did develop more as I got older. So when I first got into witchcraft, when I first claimed the term, when I first claimed the label of witch, I wasn't thinking as much about results and about you know, how important it was to see that the effort that I was putting in was having results in the real world and was having, you know, quantifiable results in my personal experience of life. I definitely had very high-minded stages in my witchcraft journey where it was really about doing it and experiencing it in the moment of doing it, and not focusing so much on whether or not it had a result per se that could be quantifiable in the real world. And even when I've always been quite a big record keeper in my craft, but even having said that, I wasn't always as strongly invested in results as I am these days. These days I'm very much about, like, did it work, did it not work, how well did it work, what can I tweak, what can I change, what would work better. But there have been times in my past, during my teens and my early 20s particularly, where I was a little bit more high-minded about what I was doing. And by high-minded in my particular case, I just mean that it was more about the fact that I was doing it and I was experiencing doing it than it was about whether or not I could link it to anything that had changed in the real world. But even in those times where I was very much more about being it and embodying it and doing it, I still had this feeling that, like, you know, it's got to be having some result, right? Otherwise, what is happening here? And how can I improve what I'm doing so that I can see the result? So it was always of importance to me to some degree or another, but I would say the amount of importance that it had to me definitely grew over the course of time. If you are trying things at the moment in your craft and you're not feeling like anything's really hitting the spot, or if you're not trying anything and you're paused in your craft at the moment because you're not really sure what would hit the spot, might I encourage you to think about where you find your sources of power, what makes you feel potent, what makes you feel powerful. You might have to do a big inventory across lots of different areas of your life to figure out the answers to this question of what makes you feel powerful. You might have to look at the music that makes you feel powerful, the clothing that makes you feel powerful, the kinds of words that make you feel powerful, the environments, the sights, smells, colours, you know, all that stuff. You will also then, of course, have to think about what power is to you. What does it mean to you? What does it feel like to you in the body? What does it feel like to you when you are really experiencing it coursing through you, coursing through your veins, coursing through your beingness? I know what power feels like for me. I cannot really explain or describe what it's supposed to feel like for you. I also feel like for me there's a difference between this false, puffed up, egoic empowerment and a true feeling of empowerment, which to me is like a strong core of stability that runs through my body and runs through my mind, a sense that it's okay for me to be who I am in the world, and a sense that I am comfortable with my own personal gnosis, my own experiences. Power to me is not just about what I've learned and what I've discovered and how I have integrated that into who I am, but it's just about being authentic in my being and knowing that I'm allowed to be that way. And there is a certain puffed upness that I'm describing when it comes to power as well, but it's not from an empty place where I'm scared and I need to feel empowered because I'm actually really afraid. For me, sometimes power can be about sitting in my fear, sitting with each raw emotion, whether it happens to be more of a positive one or whether it feels like more of a negative, destabilizing one, and knowing that there's power and potency in that too. And I could go on and on about what power means to me and how I feel empowered, but I think that there are probably layers to it for me, and there are these deepest vestiges of power that I feel and that I know when I'm experiencing them. And I would invite you to think about what that means for you in your personal life experience, because just as no one can tell you where to find your power as a witchcraft practitioner, no one can tell you what power actually is for you and how it manifests in your reality either. That is an exploration that I would recommend that you go on. When it comes to finding your sources of power that you can take into your witchcraft with you, you can sort of involve in your practice. A lot of it is about checking the timeline of your entire life so far and thinking about maybe the earliest possible times that you felt empowered, or that you felt really fizzy and very strong and very connected and very like you were connected to maybe something beyond yourself, or something that was deeply inside yourself that was beyond your linguistic ability to explain it, but really made you feel like upright, centered, bigger than the sum of your parts, right? You sometimes need to go through the entire timeline of your life to find that stuff and think about what gave you those feelings in the first place when you were a child, when you maybe really needed to feel powerful. What was it that made you feel powerful? When a feeling of power came out of nowhere, a surge of power came out of absolutely fucking nowhere, where did it come from? What was it? Was it a song? Was it a dance you were learning? Was it something that an adult said to you? Was it a bedtime story that you used to have read to you over and over again? Was it a feeling of running away? Was it a feeling of coming home? Was it a discovery that you made? Was it an outfit that you wore? What was it that made you feel that incredibly strong sense of potency that you still have a flicker of or a memory of now? What was tied to that? Was it a realization? Was it an understanding of something that you believed about yourself or about the world? Was it a secret that was revealed to you? Was it a secret that you revealed to somebody else? There have probably been so many times in your life where you have connected to that strong feeling that you are empowered, you are able, you are ready to do something, you have everything you need within yourself, And I think that even from our earliest memories, we can identify times where power and potency came to us or was revealed to us, or we reached somewhere and we plucked it, we took it, we owned it for ourselves. If you are still struggling to figure out what kind of witchcraft is going to be the most effective for you, if you're still struggling to figure out how you're going to make witchcraft absolutely yours and do it your way in a way that yields positive results, makes your life better and makes you feel enhanced, then go back through the timeline of your whole life and think, where was my power? Where was my power in childhood? Where was my power in adolescence? And, really think about those key times where you experience this revealing of power, this experience of power. Try not to tell yourself that any particular thing that you could put into your craft that would give you power or potency is silly, or it's not worthwhile, or you can't do it. It is absolutely your world. It's your kingdom. You are building it from the ground up. So if you want to repeat song lyrics from a song that you loved in your childhood or adolescence, or lines from a fairy tale in the mirror because you feel like they give you that sense of potency that you got back then you can do that. If you found that you got a lot of power and a lot of vibrancy from connecting with a particular cartoon character or a particular character from a piece of children's literature, and you want to bring that character in, or you want to evoke the qualities of that character, or you want to have a picture of that character on your altar, again, not silly, do it, try it. Think of everything as pure experimentation. If you really feel like you're in your own way with this stuff and you feel like you are not allowed to do these things, you're not allowed to make it everything that it could be for you because certain things are silly, or you liked them as a child so you're not allowed to like them now, then you can get out of your own way by at least telling yourself, okay, well, let me experiment. Let's say it's not going to be a permanent fixture in my craft, but let's say that I want to experiment. Let's say that I want to see whether it works or not. And maybe that will help you to get out of your own way when it comes to telling yourself that you're being foolish, telling yourself that you're being silly. What does it hurt to experiment with something to see whether or not it adds value to your practice? Who are you hurting? Who are you harming by doing that? What does it really matter if you want to work with a cartoon character, for instance? Let's just stick with that example. You know, like if you really want to do it just to see if it works and just to see if it adds value, then at least then you will have your answer afterwards. Instead of speculating, instead of wondering, is that something that could give me power or not? I will never know because I feel too stupid and too foolish to try. Instead, just say to yourself, well, you know, what harm can it do? And remember that this life is for trying those things and for giving yourself that permission. And you might laugh at yourself, you might feel silly when you're doing certain things, absolutely, but that's part of it. There's a lot of seriousness around witchcraft that doesn't need to be there. There's a lot of solemnity around witchcraft that doesn't need to be there. Can it get very serious? Yeah, absolutely. Can it be game changing? Absolutely. But I do think there's a lot of very sort of like stiff, rigid seriousness. And it's the same sort of thing that happens with sex, you know? It's like, why can't we have fun? Why can't we laugh? Why can't we acknowledge the ridiculous elements of it, the joyful elements of it, the adventurous elements of it, the bits of it that are funny, genuinely, you know, and that makes sex better. And it's just the exact same. Witchcraft and sex, they're like a Venn diagram. A lot of magic is made in both respects, and it's always more helpful as well if you can have the full spectrum of your feelings and the full spectrum of your experiences in both areas of life. If it's all seriousness and if it's all pomposity and grandiosity and oh, very serious and witch, you know, then you're not going to be getting the fullness from it that you deserve and that will give you the sense of what is genuinely possible. And if you are only serious with your craft, and if you're only being very solemn with it and very stiff with it, very grandiose, very pompous with it, I guarantee you that you are not tapping into the fullness of what is probably your power, as far as your power can go. Because we do have to also allow ourselves to experiment with stuff that does feel a bit silly or a bit weird or definitely different to anything we've read or definitely different to anything we've seen in videos. And during those times, we will laugh at ourselves, or we might laugh at ourselves. Give yourself permission to laugh at something you're doing in your craft, but do it anyway. Give yourself permission to say to yourself out loud, oh, this is ridiculous, I feel ridiculous, and then carry on, see what happens. I know a lot of you are aware that I have a disco ball on my altar, and I have a disco ball on my altar because disco balls make me feel powerful. They make me feel pretty. They make me feel prismatic. They make me feel excited. I love disco balls. There's a disco ball in one of my favourite clubs in the world, De Mar Cantina in Amsterdam. There's a big disco ball in one of the rooms in there, and I love it. You know, I've seen disco balls on and off my whole life and just loved them. And I associate them with music. I associate them with hedonism. I associate them with so many scenes that I love and so many vibes that I catch that I feel amazing on, and so many waves that I ride in my reality that are important to me and make sense to me. So of course there's a disco ball on my altar, and it's also a disco ball that I wore around my neck at a festival. So I associate it with really potent memories and potent people in my life. I also have Joan of Arc right next to the disco ball. I've had punk icons on my altar before, and I've mixed that in with Catholic saints and Catholic iconography. Again, I get a lot of power from that. I get a lot of meaning from that. There are different ways that you will get power for different things, and you might want to explore that as well. The power that you receive when you're sexually confident is comes from the same sort of source, but is different to the power that you receive when you are pumping yourself up for a job interview, you know, and you're really sort of trying to get into your potency and your strength there. So you might want to look at the different areas of your life and where power comes into play in each of those areas as well. And you might want to have things within your witchcraft path that are symbolic of the different forms of power that you can experience. There's a power that people feel when they're protesting that is different from a power that people feel when they're cutting rude shapes on the dance floor. I think it's from the same source, but it can be dressed up in different ways. It can be received via different avenues. It can come in different shapes. And it's worth knowing that about yourself. It's worth exploring that about yourself. And, you know, if you really want to practice deconditioning, and I might talk about deconditioning in another video soon, if you really want to break down the ways in which you've been programmed so that you can have a witchcraft practice that is full and that is honest and that is adventurous and takes you out into the further reaches of who you are, then you might also want to look at what makes other people feel powerful, or what makes people come across as powerful in your eyes. And it might be that you want to look at people that you completely disagree with, maybe people in your life, people in the political sphere, celebrities. Take a look at what happens when they feel powerful. How do they reach for their power? What does it look like when they are projecting an idea of themselves as being powerful or feeling empowered? And what is it that you don't like about that? What is it that you would prefer to be different from when you look at that, and why? Sometimes it is about imagining being a completely different type of person as well, and experiencing power through the lens of that person rather than through your own lens. Not so that you can ultimately become somebody different when you're practicing witchcraft, but so that you can understand maybe your own limitations or the boundaries and the barriers that you have around your idea of what power can be. And when you understand the boundaries that you have that might have been drawn for you by your conditioning, your culture, your family life, that's when you can start to pull away. You can start to go beyond those toxic boundaries that stop you from really tapping into your power at the deepest possible source. In witchcraft, it's often spoken about that we can evoke the qualities of a being, a human being, a disembodied being, whatever the case might be. We talk about how we can really evoke the qualities of a particular location, a particular memory or a vibe or a scenario. We talk about how we can tap into different vibrations, different energies, different ideas, and we can bring them to us. We can breathe them into us. We talk about connecting with archetypes and really evoking the particular characteristics of archetypes. And I think sometimes we can empower ourselves to do that more effectively when we also can do that with things that we don't necessarily gel with. You know, I think that for me, in my witchcraft, looking at my power, looking at where I find power, looking at how I access power that feels good for me, has been massively aided by thinking about how people find power in toxic and negative ways that I don't like, ways that I don't vibe with, ways that even make me feel fearful. You know, so I go to that side that for me feels like unpleasant, you know. I think about the way that people obtain a sense of power and hold on to a sense of power in ways that I find to be unfortunate or ugly or unappealing or scary. And I think about what it must be like to be those people and to connect with my power when I am that person that I'm actually very different from. I do this for practice. I do this to practice my ability to bring power to me, to bring different energies to me, to connect with different things that I may need to use in my craft for one reason or another. I don't imagine myself, for instance, feeling powerful as a neo-Nazi because I want to be a neo-Nazi at all. I do it so that I can really connect with everything that is the case and understand how power can be connected with in ways that are dangerous, and how power is this spectrum according to consciousness and according to experiences. I also do it so I can understand more about what it is that I'm trying to combat and break down. You know, it's very difficult to fuck with an enemy if you don't really understand that enemy, if you don't know where that enemy is coming from, if you don't understand what made that enemy energy or that enemy idea what it turned out to be. How is it there? You know, why is it there? What was its source? What was its genesis? A lot of that knowledge comes from reading and researching and understanding, but a lot of it also comes from personal experience, personal gnosis, putting yourself in the shoes of somebody who's completely different to you, wearing the clothing of somebody who's completely different to you, breaking down your own sense of what it is that you can grasp at for power, understanding how other people receive their sense of power, and also understanding how you can do something about that or change that if you feel that something does need to be done about it or something does need to be changed. Let me sum that up because I think I said that in a really messy way. What I'm trying to say is evoke the energies and the spirit of a thing or a person or an idea or a location that you like and that feeds you. But then also don't be afraid to do the same thing with something that you don't like, something that doesn't feed you, something that you don't think you'll ever receive a sense of power from. And maybe you wish other people didn't either. But it's about going on the journey. It's about being able to use your imagination, testing the far reaches of your imagination, which is one of the most potent tools that we have in witchcraft. Look at this beautiful sunset. Bloody gorgeous. Okay, back to me. Try and be on this exploration to power up regularly, not just when you need something, not just when you're about to do spellcraft, not just when you're about to recognize an esprit or a sabbat, if that's what you do or if that's what you want to do. Don't forget, going back to what I said about connecting with what is fizzy and juicy and exciting for you and getting away from what is not. That includes cutting out recognitions of moon phases if that doesn't speak to you. That includes cutting out sabbats if they don't speak to you. But let's say that you are getting to grips with what speaks to you as a witch. You are understanding more about about what empowers you as a witch. Try to power up regularly. Try to tune into the theme of power regularly. Try to bring power in as regularly as you can. So it's not just about being ready to do a working, getting ready to do a working and thinking suddenly, oh, I need to feel empowered for this. I need to play this music. I need to put on this outfit. I need to connect with this idea. I need to read this passage from this metaphysical book so I can feel powerful. Try to always be bringing it in every day. And a big part, I think, of how witches can do this is through thinking about how you want to feel when you go to work or when you leave the home. I know it's inconvenient to mention that during a time, at the time of upload, where most of us are in lockdown and not going to work or leaving the home that often. But that ordinarily would be a really good example that I would give to people. It's about, really thinking about something that you can do to get yourself into a feeling of potency and stability before you go and do something. So I'm not going out every single day, far from it. I'm going out just when I need food or when I really feel like I need a quick walk. I haven't been out today. For instance, I didn't go out yesterday. I have a balcony that I can sit on, so I'm very fortunate for that. I can still get a little bit of fresh air. But the majority of the time when, pre-COVID, if you will, when I leave the house, when I open the door, which the majority of the time would be every day to some degree or another for me, I am thinking about shielding, protecting, centering, and all of that. And I do that even when I don't leave the home, but I do notice particularly that I do it more just before I leave. So just as I'm standing behind my front door, getting ready to take that deep breath and walk out into all of these different energies, twisting and turning, and different vibrations and different attitudes and experiences that might occur, some of which are very unexpected and unpredictable, I like to feel that I am with myself and that I'm riding my wave and that I'm holding the vibration that I've chosen to hold in the world. And that is an act of bringing power to me, or connecting with the power that is within me, if you will. For me, it's about mirroring the power that's within me and therefore like magnifying it by connecting it with power that is outside of me or that comes from a source other than me as a human being. So for instance, when I think about the goddess Hel, the Norse goddess of the underworld, when I embody her energy, I feel very empowered. I feel very powerful. I feel like I could do something, and when I think about Joan of Arc as a figure and as an archetypal force and as a saint, a similar thing happens where I feel very empowered. I feel very powerful. I feel like I could do something. I have certain words of power that I use over and over again that sometimes I will repeat to myself at my altar in my morning meditations, or I will say when I'm standing behind my front door and I'm about to leave my home. I really have a lot of different ways that I power up on a daily basis. It's not just like, oh, I'm about to do a spell, where's my power coming from? What will make me feel empowered to do the spell? What will make me feel empowered to know that the spell will work? I don't just think about it during those times. I think about it regularly as I can. You might also want to think about how you get yourself into a state of potency and stability before you help somebody, before you have a conversation where you're going to be giving advice or being a listening ear for somebody. I'm wearing this beautiful piece of clothing right now that belongs to my best friend because it's very sweeping and beautiful and it feels gorgeous and I love the colours, and when I walk around the apartment in it I feel incredible. So I'm wearing that right now for that reason, because it makes me feel powerful. It makes me feel like I am really in my potency and I'm feeling myself. It's definitely worth also thinking about what drains your power, what makes you feel powerless, and attempting to reduce its influence as much as possible. Where you cannot completely reduce its influence, that's understandable, but if you can try as much as you can not to also use it as an excuse not to do potent witchcraft or not to step into your spiritual potency, then that's obviously a better thing than finding that you are using it as an excuse. You are using it so that you can stay in standstill, so that you can self-sabotage, so that you never really get an opportunity to see how powerful you could be. There are things that drain our power. There are people that drain our power. There are systems that drain our power. There are whole industries who rely on our power being as drained as it can be, and on us feeling as though we need to consume something in order to regain that sense of power. For sure, definitely, without a doubt. And I do think we need to acknowledge that. It's not like we can completely cut off from all of that and find that it doesn't affect us in any way, but we can also end up using it to sabotage our progress as potent, spiritual and magical beings. And we don't want to do that either. When I get to my deathbed, I don't want to look back over the life I led and look at all the excuses that I made not to do magic, not to have an altar, not to do experiments in the magical and metaphysical sphere, and think to myself, oh shit, you know, I really let that get in the way. I really wanted to see what I could do. I really believed I was a witch, but I never really let myself have it. I never really let myself own it and walk with it. I don't want to feel like that, and I don't want you to feel like that, you know, either. In fact, when you think about the systems that make you feel powerless, when you think about the situations going on that drain you or make you feel powerless, when you think about industries that may rely upon your feelings of powerlessness, then you know what your witchy power is for. Because a lot of people don't just use the craft for their personal gain, and there's nothing wrong with using it just for your personal gain. There's nothing wrong with focusing on witchcraft for whatever it is that you want to achieve, whatever it is that you want to experience. But a lot of people are also directing their witchcraft and their witchy energy towards breaking down systems of oppression, and they are directing their witchcraft towards empowering those who feel much more powerless than they themselves as practitioners will ever feel. They're directing it towards the marginalised, they're directing it towards the situations that they feel need to be dealt with and the systems that need to be dismantled, or the individuals that deserve to be raised up and don't really get to be raised up by the way that society is structured currently. So the more that you connect with your power on the daily, on the fucking regular, the more that you are also having the potential to deal with the things that you feel hold you back or contribute to your sense of powerlessness. You are primed, basically, is what I'm saying. You're essentially always powered up, rather than letting yourself go rusty, taking a few weeks off maybe, you know, going away from your practice, not doing a spell, not doing a ritual, and then suddenly grasping for what gives you power, what gives you potency. If you power up as regularly as possible, connect to the themes of power and the sources of power as regularly as possible, then you will be ready. You will be ready all the time. You do not need to worry about getting ready if you're always ready. You know, so that can be an important practice for your witchcraft as well, is just, you know, connecting with power on a daily basis, not just waiting and being like, oh, I suddenly need to feel empowered, I suddenly need to be in my power. Keep focusing on it, keep thinking about what it means to you, keep thinking about how to reach for empowerment as regularly as possible. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but there's so much that I can't change. Even if I do reach for my power, even if I do figure out what makes me feel fizzy as a witch, there's so much stuff that I cannot change, even if I feel as powerful as I've ever felt. The thing is, realizing that you are a co-creator and deciding that you're going to turn your hand to what you can control rather than what is ultimately outside of your control can be a big part of what helps you to power up as fully as you can do. I think it's good to let go of what it is that you cannot dismantle as one singular person, and instead turn your hand and turn your gaze and turn your responsibility towards what it is within your power to control, and what it is within your power to make a difference with. And often that's a lot more than we tell ourselves, to be completely honest. One thing that I've noticed a lot about the people that follow my work and interact with my videos and stuff is that the rebel archetype seems to be strong with a lot of us, right? We have a very strong rebel archetype. We have a very strong connection to the archetype of the maverick, the tearaway, the cycle breaker. And a lot of us have been cycle breaking. We have been rebelling. But there is a bit of a problem sometimes with a lot of people, I think, that are drawn to my work, where they're drawn to my work because they're struggling to rebel against themselves. They ultimately need to rebel against their own idea of the importance of spiritual rigidity, the importance of following what's been set out for them before, the importance of going by the book, going by what somebody else says, going by what seems to be the trend or what seems to be the thing that other people say works for them. And we do need to learn to rebel against ourselves. If you have a strong rebel archetype and you know that you use that in other areas of your life, or you know that it comes out in other situations or around people that you disagree with, or around structures you don't want to belong to or take part in, amazing. But if you are very rigid in what you think is okay to include in your spiritual practice, then might I recommend turning the rebel archetype inwards. Use your inner rebel against yourself. Use it for yourself. Use it to break down your own structures that are keeping you tame and keeping you small and keeping you weak in your witchcraft and in your potency, in your spiritual potency. You can be a wayward little mystic. That's what I'm trying to say. You can be a wayward mystic. You can do things your way. You can really connect with what it is that drives you and that excites you. And it might be something you've never heard anybody else using before. It might be something that is from a situation that occurred in your past, or an association that you made that only you could make in the whole wide world. And even if it is something that's really, really popular, like a comic book character or an anime character, that doesn't matter. That's also amazing. You know, it's amazing if you want to use something that you can connect with other witches on. You can be like, oh wow, you know, I also use that archetype or that location from that computer game or whatever the case may be. It's amazing to have that connection and that sense of you know, your practice overlapping with somebody else's who might be in a completely different part of the world or might have a totally different life to you, but you can connect in that way. And to me, I believe that when we focus our attention on powerful things that are popular, we also add power to those powerful things. Recognizing that you both summon Pokemon characters and work with them is just as majestic as recognizing that you have something in your practice that only you know, only you do in the whole of the space-time continuum. Both of those things, I think, can have power. So don't be afraid if you want to use something that's popular or well-known. We can enjoy that, and we can enjoy mixing those things. We can enjoy mixing the uber rare and the extremely highly personalized with the things that are popular, that are enjoyable, that are highly consumed, you know, in popular culture. Don't be afraid to have a mixture of those things. Be a paradigm Pac-Man, be a paradigm pirate, be a paradigm princess. Be a paradigm whatever the fuck alliterated thing. Where you know really you can jump around, you can jump up and get down. You know, House of Pain, your witchcraft experience. What am I talking about? I haven't even drunk to the bottom of that glass, which is my first glass of the day, and already it's nonsense up in here. Guaranteed, if you start putting in what makes you feel fizzy, powerful, excited, and you start taking out what makes you feel overwhelmed, bored, stifled, you will get more real world results already. But make sure that you are doing something to record them, even if it's just putting a little line in your phone, in your notes in your phone that says, you know, did a ritual today, or started using this particular character today, or evoke the spirit of this thing today. And then, you know, mood record your moods, record your experiences. Make sure that it is working in a measurable, real world way that you can refer to, that you can see. I think a lot of people stray away from their own design because they're not giving themselves the opportunity to see how their own design is changing their life and having a positive impact. And it may well be that your own personal design of craft is changing your life and having an impact, but you've got no way to be able to look back over the weeks and months and see that that is the case. So that is one reason why record keeping is really important. You know, we record keep so that we can see what has worked, but also so that we can reassure ourselves when we are in doubt. Honey bunnies, give yourself all of the permission that you need to keep it weird and be a paradigm Pac-Man. And that's all I'm going to say. If you want to work with me one-on-one, if you want to talk about your witchy practice, if you want to brainstorm, I will leave down below the link to my witchy brainstorming sessions that I sell over on my website. You can book in using your own time zone, and we will talk about what is going on with your path, what is in your way, and how do you need to bring the potency to you and find the spiritual sweet spot that works for you. You can work with me one-on-one if you feel like you need tailored advice, tailored structure, insight from me, someone who's been doing it for a long time, and someone to listen to you, somebody who knows they've got potency but might not yet be at the point where you feel like you're really putting that potency into the driver's seat properly. I'd love to be able to talk to you about it. I also sell a reading called the Spiritual Path reading, and I sell another reading called the Solitary Witch reading. Both of those might be very useful for you if you would like me to sling cards for your particular spiritual situation and see if we can get you into the fast lane, feeling fizzy, feeling like your magic holds potency, feeling like you're revved up and ready to do something. And until the next time we meet, much love from Amsterdam, darlings. Blessed be. Mwah.